Okay, let's go.
Hi you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the movies that I've watched recently. With this group of movies, I drew a central theme being compassion and self-identity. All of these movies in one way or another, maybe not all of them, a majority of these movies in one way or another have to do with those main themes along with their specific main themes. Let's start with the first movie.
Be a part of the people that make meaning, not the thing that's made. I want to do the imagining. I don't want to be the idea.
Starting off with Barbie. Barbie was great. It was a fun movie. Barbie didn't wow me in the way I expected to be wowed. I had high expectations for the movie because I know that whenever it had aired, it aired around the same time, premiered. It premiered around the same time as Oppenheimer, and so I haven't watched Oppenheimer yet, but given that it's a Christopher Nolan film, I'm sure that it's held to a high standard. So I thought Barbie was gonna just show something completely different. It was well thought out. The set design looked expensive because everything was pink. I think it also didn't wow me because I understood the narrative too much, so there wasn't much new to discover or understand if you can relate to it a lot already, which that's not true for every single movie, but at least for this one. I love what the movie did. I love that it showed the realness, the real side of Barbie. So on to the next movie.
So what's your name?
Darby.
Sandy.
Ed.
I'm Ash.
Lars?
Do you have the Wi-Fi?
No, there's no Wi-Fi.
No exit. Okay, first and foremost, I did not like this movie. I am so glad that I read the book first, because if you read the book and then watch the movie, you'll just ask yourself, did the movie even try? The movie is a horror mystery. I'd say the same for the book, more so like mystery thriller. So it's about this college student who is on the roads during a blizzard, and so ultimately she can't drive anymore, so she's forced to stay at this rest stop for the whole night. But the night definitely gets darkened when she discovers that one of the people at the rest stop is a kidnapper. She doesn't initially know who it is. That's the mystery element, where she's trying to figure out who is the kidnapper and then also how she should go about the rest of the night. Books are typically better than movies. Yeah, for this one there was really no comparison. They kept some things the same. It's not even about that, but it's just like the movie could have been so much better if it focused less on being horror and gory and just focused on the thriller aspect, which you definitely get from the book. There's no real suspense in the movie because I feel like over everything, the music that was playing was just like that scary soundtrack music that you find in horror movies. So yeah, I would not recommend. I just wouldn't recommend it. So let's move on to the next movie.
Thank you, honey. It's so sweet of you.
This movie is about a couple named Carl and Yaya. They're both influencers and they're invited on this luxury cruise ship vacation. So they go in thinking, of course, that it's going to be just that, a luxury vacation, but it ends up as the opposite. I believe the synopsis there. So the main themes that I gather from this movie are social hierarchy, equality, and power. But the main thing that I did gather from this movie is that when the power dynamic is flipped against the rich and the poor, the desire for status control remains the same. I did think the movie was too long. It did have a lot of moments of foreshadowing and also a lot of open pockets for interpretation.
Call me Ladybird like you said you would.
You should just go to City College. You know, with your work ethic, just go to City College and then to jail and then back to City College, and then maybe you'd learn to pull yourself up and not expect everybody to do everything.
Ladybird follows the relationship between a mother named Marion and her daughter named Ladybird. The two are peas in a pod in that they are very, very similar. They are both very opinionated. They butt heads a lot. They're also loving. So all those traits can kind of be volcanic when they are together. So one of the main themes in Lady Bird is that attention is a form of love. And picking up the details of someone else's existence is a way of showing that you love them, or can be interpreted as a way of showing that you love them. So Lady Bird and her mother do this to each other each time they are together. They're always, whether it's nitpicking or noticing or just verbalizing what they are seeing of each other. Although it's a drama, it doesn't feel dramatic because it doesn't drag you into moments of high intensity drama and then cut to comedy and then back to drama again. It feels more realistic than that. I don't fully agree with the thesis of the movie that love is attention. So in the movie, there's this point where it gets to where they kind of just say it in plain terms, basically stating that love is attention and attention is love. Attention can be a form of love, but I wouldn't say the two are synonymous or interchangeable. At times, Marion, as a parent to Lady Bird, uses her attention as a currency. She kind of gives her attention when things are seemingly going good or okay, and then she'll withdraw it if she doesn't know how to process things. For example, there is a moment in the movie when Lady Bird holds off on telling her mom that she applied to East Coast schools, and this is a big deal because they live on the West Coast in California. After Marion learns that not only has Lady Bird applied to these East Coast schools, but that she got accepted and is considering them heavily, she withdraws her attention from Lady Bird completely. This makes Lady Bird kind of go nuts and spiral because she's used to her mother giving her attention, whether or not it's good or bad, whether or not they're arguing or yelling or loving or quote unquote hating one another. This is kind of new territory for Lady Bird in which she doesn't understand how to navigate. And granted, both of them don't know how to navigate this, but the movie just showcases the reality between the two of them and how they're dealing with this point in their relationship right now. And of course, Saoirse Ronan, I think she's a great actress, so makes for a good watch.
I have a lot of questions for both of you, but please tell me if this is not the best time.
It's as good a time as any.
Switching over to my notebook for this one. For some of these movies, I have to write my thoughts. For some of these movies, I can type them. But yeah, this was one of them. I had to write them out. This movie, if I had to rate it, I would give this movie a 3.5 out of 5 because it was great at telling the story, but let me just give a summary. Let me just give a brief summary. May December goes beyond the walls of paradise of a famous married couple. The viewer gets an insight into the dynamics of Gracie and Joe's marriage through the perspective of a Hollywood actress named Elizabeth. Elizabeth is starring Gracie in a film, so it's a movie within the movie, and she seeks to study her through method acting. In other words, Elizabeth is looking to study Gracie by becoming Gracie. So she wants to know the mechanics of Gracie and her behavior and why she is the way she is. I think it's worse to find out that a movie is based on a true story after watching the movie. It's labeled as a romantic comedy. I don't know why. It's more so a psychological drama. I feel like that's more accurate. I'll do some of my rapid fire main takeaways from this movie. If I had to rate it, I would rate it 3.5 out of 5 stars because just given the premise of the story, I have to take off a star for that. I can't give it a perfect score because even though the acting was great, the storytelling was great, the premise of the story and then the fact that it's based on a true story is... Although Elizabeth, who is the Hollywood actress that's starring Gracie, although she is trying to learn Gracie's mannerisms and behavior, they're one and the same. They share a handful of similar traits, whether or not they want to acknowledge it. And basically for the whole movie, they don't acknowledge that they are the same. But the movie is foreshadowing and ironic in a way in that they're always showing them in a parallel light. They're always mirroring one another and they kind of morph into the same person. Takeaway number 2, the movie is disturbing. And number 3, Charles Melton, who is the actor that plays Joe, did a great job in conveying this character. And I feel like getting his role right and in terms of casting was probably the most important for this movie. Yeah, I feel like he conveyed so much about the character without having to say a lot half the time. But yeah, that's May, December. I have watched Forrest Gump before, but I haven't watched it fully since high school, but I have new perspectives on watching it now. This time around, I was drawn to the life stories of Lieutenant Dan and Jenny. Watching it now, it was so obvious how deeply Jenny cared for Forrest. Jenny's traumatic childhood undeniably affects what she goes through as she gets older. She runs away because she feels that Forrest is too innocent and too pure in comparison to her. And then moving on to Lieutenant Dan. So Lieutenant Dan rests his identity with his ranking in the army. There's one scene where after they had just gone through a pretty intense battle where Forrest had to save Lieutenant Dan's life, essentially. Lieutenant Dan did not like this at all. There's a scene where in the middle of the night, he questions Forrest as to why he saved his life, because he would have been glad, more than glad, to die with honor in the soil on the battleground. I was sympathetic to his story because when he is stripped of the identity that he clothed himself with, he's left with the important question of what's left, what's important to me, and who am I without this? So seeing him navigate that was sad because he was very much so down in the dumps. But then it got brighter when he realized that there's more to life than what he once thought was everything to life. I also love at the end when everyone is seated and he is the only one standing because he spent so many of his years sitting in his wheelchair, so whenever he gets the chance, he will use his feet to stand.
Did you have a good holiday then?
The best. Wish we could have stayed for longer.
Me too.
Last but not least, we have Aftersun, and I'm back to my notebook for this one. So a brief summary about Aftersun is that it's a movie that follows the relationship of a father named Callum and his daughter named Sophie. So the movie takes place as Sophie is trying to remember a trip that her and her father had taken 20 or so years ago. So she's trying to remember that trip specifically because on that trip her dad was 30, and as she's trying to remember that trip, she is now 30. The movie is viewed as and feels like watching a memory unfold before your eyes. I'll go through some of the main themes that stuck out to me. So the first theme being nostalgia. That was the biggest takeaway for me because I feel like as Callum was on this trip with his daughter, he is aware of how nostalgic the moments feel as they're happening, which I feel like I get that feeling a lot too, where things are happening and they're good memories. Like you're viewing them at the time as if it's already a memory, even though it's currently happening before your eyes. So it feels nostalgic in the moment. But yes, nostalgia. Okay, let me stick to my notes. As the movie is piecing a memory together, it feels nostalgic at the same time because as the memories from that vacation are coming together in Sophie's mind, they're also fleeting. So everything that she thought she once knew at the time of that trip, she was 11 when they went on that trip, she's now seeing it in a different light. The next theme being memory. The perception of your own memory isn't always the full truth because two things can be true at once. On this vacation, Callum is experiencing it one way while Sophie is perceiving it in a whole different way. So as Callum is experiencing moments of happiness while vacationing with his daughter, he is also dealing with the suffocating undercurrent that is his depression. His depression directly affects how he interacts with Sophie in that he is fixated on making sure they squeeze in as much fun, happiness, and bliss into this vacation as possible. So I mentioned this because yes, Callum's moments of happiness with Sophie are real. His depression was also very real at the time. At the same time, Sophie is experiencing this vacation. She is perceiving it to be very joyful. So however, as Sophie gets older and starts to recollect these memories, she begins to understand what her father was going through. It definitely gets you thinking about how much Callum had to decide to sugarcoat from his daughter at the time. So I'm just gonna leave it there, but that's my thoughts on Aftersun. So those are the 7 movies that I will review today. I'll see which movies and which themes I choose to review for the next video. Thanks for tuning in to this one. That's a wrap. Bye.